We are without Brian this week, but he will be back next week.
Mm-hmm.
But don't worry. Instead of Brian, we have Dr. Glenn Doerr of Cedarville. He's a professor of international studies at Cedarville. Hi, Dr. Doerr. Thanks for being back with us.
It's great to be with you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So you want to talk a little bit about the Middle East. There's a lot going on right now. We had you about 2 months ago talking about Israel and Hamas, and then with some other stuff going on. Can you start with what's some updates on Israel and Hamas? What's going on there?
Certainly. If we go back to October the 7th of 2023, the brutal invasion of 22 villages and towns and kibbutzim in the south of Israel, 1,200 roughly dead, and then 239 hostages taken by Hamas into Gaza. And then since then, we've seen a significant Israeli military opportunity to try and root out the Hamas from Gaza and to try and get the hostages back. There are some 132 hostages that are still in Gaza, and certainly the fighting has become very brutal. Bombing campaigns on both sides, very significant. The Hamas-run health ministries reported some 25,000 Palestinians dead, unfortunately, and a continuation of just really terrible fighting in that area. But we've also seen expansions of fire in different parts of the Middle East as well, and really a danger of something much wider breaking out as well.
Do these other kind of conflicts or incidents in the Middle East, does it have to do with anything that's happening with Israel and Hamas?
Yes, a lot of it is very strongly connected, and so we are seeing Hezbollah, a terrorist organization in the south of Lebanon. They fired some 2,000 rockets and missiles into northern Israel out of solidarity. And a good number of Israelis in the north of the country have moved into the center, places like Netanya and Tel Aviv and Jerusalem, as a means of just trying to get away from all of that. But we've also seen the Houthis, the rebels in Yemen, that have been fighting a civil war that's approaching a decade long. But their punchline is death to America and death to Israel. And so they have been firing missiles along the Red Sea at Israel, but also at U.S. and Western ships in the Red Sea. And it's provoked a response from the U.S. and U.K. governments to try and root out the Houthis from that area. And unfortunately, 2 Navy SEALs died recently in an attempt to stop the Houthis. And then beyond that, we're seeing Iran-backed militias in Iraq and Syria attacking Israeli positions, but mainly U.S. bases in those countries. And so there's been an uptick there. And then an exchange of missile fire between Iran and Pakistan, not at each other, but trying to stop respective insurgent groups in each other's countries from causing trouble within each other. And so there's just a lot that's happening in and around Israel, most of it connected to the Israel conflict with Hamas. But certainly just a lot of moving pieces that are really very dangerous.
Yeah, so to go back to the Houthis attacking the commercial vessels in the Red Sea. So that started, from what I was reading, in early December, and now they've started to vessels have started to go kind of around Africa instead, taking like the long route, so they're not going through the Red Sea and the Suez Canal. And so then was it last week, the UK and the US responded to it? And
yes.
Are they attacking just US and UK vessels, or are they attacking anything that's going through there?
It's almost anything going through there, but certainly when it's U.S. flagged or Western flagged, it's additional to them. And as you adroitly noted, ships are now having to go all the way around Africa, which is really increasing costs. And certainly the challenge for those that are on board that are trying to simply transport goods from one port to another, it's making their lives much, much more difficult. If we think of the Somali pirates about a decade ago that was so challenging in and around that area. It seems like now there's another group that is specifically in that area. The Houthis had long been simply connected to Yemen civil war, fighting for their position. The Biden administration took them off the terrorism watch list as a designation, and has now had to put them back on there. And so this is certainly an uptick in what they're trying to do internationally, and so much of it is connected to Israel as well, because they, as you noted, they started firing in that direction, and have also turned to commercial shipping vessels as well.
Mm. And in the joint response from the U.S. and U.K., what are they doing in response to these attacks on the vessels?
The first is carrier strike groups. So if we think of an aircraft carrier that's surrounded by a range of different naval vessels, those typically will move across different parts of the world. But when there are dangerous situations, they can be moved. And so it's a strong military presence. We're also seeing bombing campaigns of Houthi positions, which makes life more difficult for them, and puts them on the back foot as well. And then much greater resources connected in the Red Sea to help shipping vessels. But obviously that comes with a significant price tag and significant dangers as well. So there are a number of different measures that are being employed, but it's certainly made life a lot more difficult, and the safety aspect is one that's significant. And the cost is also at some point going to be passed on to the consumer with that shipment of goods.
Yeah, because there would be the loss of, an addition of, time and energy of going around Africa instead of straight through the Red Sea. But also, is there like a loss of what's been on those vessels?
To some degree, yes. Not a lot of that information has been released because it is, it can be a bit sensitive in terms of specific details of an attack and what's attacked, but it's often a situation where a terrorist organization just has an opportunity and then takes it. It's not so much necessarily what's on board, but that's the challenge in a global market where these goods are shipped across the world. Just that interruption, any interruption, can cause a backlog. It can cause challenges, and then a different route from which to traverse shipping those goods.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned Iran and Pakistan firing missiles at each other, but at an insurgent group. I want to talk to you about that, but we're right up against a break. So when we come back, we'll talk about Iran and Pakistan with Dr. Glenn Dewar. We're back with Dr. Glenn Dewar of Cedarville, the professor of international studies. We're talking about the Middle East, just a lot of moving pieces over there, several different conflicts and incidents happening, a lot surrounding the start of Israel and Hamas war, which was October 7th. Dr. Dewar, you mentioned Iran and Pakistan have been firing missiles at each other's territory, not aimed at each other, but at a different insurgent group. Can you talk with us more about that?
Yes, it's quite complex, but it's a strange one because they each fired on each other, and then they both publicly said, we're not in a war with one another, we're going after these insurgent groups. But it is certainly something of a concern. For Iran, they were going after Jaish al-Adl, which is a Sunni separatist movement, insurgent movement that operates in the southeast of Iran. And what it does is it goes across the border after different attacks. And likewise, we're seeing something very similar with Pakistan with the Balochi Liberation Front, which is a group that wants to create an independent country called Balochistan for ethnic Balochis. And so it's kind of this very strange situation, because in the midst of everything else that's happening in the Middle East, we're seeing these groups kind of emboldened by the opportunity. And it's worth noting that both countries are very, very heterogeneous. Often we see Iran in the news and we think, Okay, it's run by the Ayatollah. It's very uniform, but roughly two-thirds of Iranians are ethnic and linguistic Persians, and there are a lot of groups around the periphery of Iran that are either Sunni Muslims or of an ethnic minority and really don't like the central government. If we go back to 2022, the 22-year-old Kurdish lady, Mahsa Amini, was killed by the morality police in Iran for not wearing her hijab correctly, in their view, and it kicked off this cascade of major protests in Iran. And so there are a lot of these types of situations in Iran where groups are sensing a weakness of the government and initiating some politically led mischief in order to try and destabilize them. And so the point of exchanging missile fire is one that I think caught a lot of analysts off guard when it was announced.
And so they're both going after different groups, but on each other's side.
Yes.
Okay. I feel like this may be a dumb question, but like, could you just not have a conversation about it instead of like firing at each other? Could you not agree to like go after them together?
A long-standing tactic of terrorist organizations, and we can look at the IRA in the 1970s and 1980s, or ETA in Spain in a similar time frame. What they typically will do is they'll commit a terrorist attack, and then those terrorists will cross a border into an area where they have ethnic kin. So in Spain, they went to France. In Ireland, they were either in the UK or the United States, and they would quote unquote cool off there. And it's possible to have a conversation, but oftentimes the host government doesn't want to engage in violence or has no means to go after them themselves. And so it's led to this point of using missiles to strike in a precision term to try and root it out. With Spain and France, they eventually figured out ways of using police forces to work together in tandem, but it takes a fair bit of cooperation to get to that point. So there's no such thing as a silly question in international relations. It's so complicated at times, and talking about it can be good, but just getting into some of these restive areas on the part of the government is sometimes challenging. They kind of let them to themselves with wider autonomy as long as they don't cause problems within their own country. And so that's one of the challenges that both governments in Iran and Pakistan have faced.
Is this in Iran and Pakistan? Does this have anything to do with Israel and Hamas at all, or is it totally separate, do you think?
It's separate in a sense because geographically it's not close. No one is trying to go after Israel necessarily, but it's connected in the sense that because a lot is happening in the wider Middle East, because the Iranian government is backing militias in Syria and Iraq, and they're funding Hezbollah and Hamas, they're also weaker. They're losing their resources. They're giving them up. And so it's kind of an opportune time for different groups, including Jad al-Adl, to get involved and to try and utilize this opportunity in time where the government is weaker. And so it is tangentially connected.
That's a lot. There's a lot going on in the Middle East, and I think we know there's always just a lot going on in the Middle East, and we can continue to pray for all of the civilians there as there's war, around them, and as those that are innocent and just trying to, live their lives. Where do we look to from here? What do we need to be looking for in the next upcoming weeks and months in the Middle East?
Certainly, if any of these situations escalate, it's deeply, deeply problematic. I was in Israel and the West Bank in 2018, and one thing that was remarkable to me is just how peaceful it was and how the people got along pretty well, chatting with Israelis and Palestinians and getting food, and just everyone being very, very welcoming. A lot of that has gone backwards. A lot of the exchanges have really decreased. And so If there's a further uptick in violence in the West Bank, that's problematic. If Hezbollah continues firing rockets and missiles into Israel from southern Lebanon, if they increase that, that's another real red flag. If the Houthis can't be put in a box, that too is a challenge. And so any escalation, that is something we really need to watch. U.S. troops in Iraq being attacked again, that's another deep challenge. And so there are a lot of these independent pieces that if they get connected, it could be something much, much wider, and that is the danger.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Duerr, for keeping us up to date on international affairs, what's going on. We really appreciate your time with us, and we'll talk to you in just a couple weeks. Absolutely.
Have a great day. Thank you.
Thank you. If you want to hear more from Dr. Duerr, he's had, I think, 2 times with us in the fall talking about Israel and Hamas and their conflict, as well as today's. You can text the word Israel to 440-546-2255 and hear more from him from the last couple months when this first started in October, and then he came back about 2 months ago, gave an update, and then, of course, today's. You'll find some resources there of how you can pray for Israel. There's some videos from Dr. Rydelnik as well. So, again, text the word Israel to 440-546-2255 to watch back some episodes from this fall when you guys were talking with Dr. Duerr and Dr. Rydelnik when this first all started. There's definitely a lot going on in the Middle East, so continue to pray for the Middle East. Though it's all shocking, it's not something though it's all a lot, I should say, it's not shocking.
Okay.
I think the Middle East is always, it's always been in conflict, right, with Israel. We know that to be true. We know that from the Bible, that Israel is always going to be a place that people are fighting for. So continue to pray for the Middle East, pray for those who live there, those who are civilians and just trying to live their lives while all of this chaos is going around them. If you want to know more, hear more from Dr. Duerr from past episodes with us, text the word Israel to 440-546-2255.